Hello everyone, today I will continue telling you the story of the single mother, Tusan. I hope you enjoy watching the video. After Trang left, the house returned to its familiar rhythm, yet something very different lingered in Tusan's heart. It wasn't emptiness, but a quiet settling, as if a knot that had been tied for a long time had finally come undone. She was happy for Trang. Truly happy. The day she heard that Tone's mother had accepted everything, Tusan didn't say much. She fell silent for a moment, then smiled. It wasn't a loud, bursting smile, but one as light as a breeze passing through her chest. She understood how many long, anxious nights Trang must have endured to receive those two words, acceptance, how many times she must have asked herself whether she was asking for too much happiness. Tusan had once been in that place. She had loved, hoped, and then been pushed outside the boundaries of a family simply for not being in the right place. She understood the sharp ache of standing at a distance while the person she loved struggled under pressure from both sides. She understood the quiet humiliation of seeing sincere feelings become a burden to someone else. Some pains don't need to be spoken, just one look is enough for people to recognize them in each other. So when she saw that Trang could finally stand beside Tone openly and with dignity, Tusan felt no jealousy. Instead, a very pure joy rose within her, as if a piece of her own past had been healed along with theirs. But Tusan also knew that not everyone in such circumstances is lucky enough to find a shoulder to lean on. She had been lucky. In her darkest days, when she thought she would have to shoulder everything alone, Hai had been there. He didn't protect her loudly or make grand promises, but he always stood in the right place, close enough to shelter her, steady enough that she wouldn't be afraid of falling. He didn't pull her out of pain, he walked with her through it, slowly and patiently. Thinking of that, Tusan gently turned her head to look behind her, where Hai was busy with the most ordinary of tasks. A simple image, yet one that warmed her heart. She understood that happiness doesn't come to everyone at the same time. Some people wait a very long time to be accepted, some must pass through many wounds before learning to cherish peace. And there are those, like her, who, even after suffering, eventually meet someone who loves them enough not to let go. Tusan let out a light breath. Trang had Tone. She had Hai. Each person follows a different journey, but all are worthy of the happiness they hold in their hands. That morning began very early for Tusan, not because of work, but because of a phone call. Her phone vibrated while the sun was still gentle. As soon as she opened her eyes, she saw Hai's name on the screen. In just a moment, her heart skipped a beat. She answered, her voice still tinged with sleep. "Hi." On the other end was his familiar, warm voice, but somehow lighter and happier than usual. "I'm free tonight. I want to pick you up for dinner, then we can take a walk, consider it a date." Tusan paused for a few seconds, not from surprise, but because the joy arrived so softly, so gently. Lately, Hai had been very busy, his calls were often short, their meetings rushed. She understood and never blamed him, yet deep down there were moments when she longed to be beside him longer, more completely. "I've arranged everything," Hai continued, his voice slowing. "Today I want to spend time with you. Just the two of us." Tusan smiled, a very real smile. "I agree." After hanging up, she sat still for a long while. In the small room, the morning suddenly felt different, the sunlight through the window seemed brighter, the breeze gentler. Her heart felt light, a childlike anticipation quietly spreading through her chest. All day, Tusan worked faster than usual. Whenever she had a free moment, her eyes would drift unconsciously to the clock. Time passed slowly, in the most charming way. As evening approached, she stopped by a familiar shop. Not to buy anything special, just a new outfit, simple yet enough to make her feel cherished. Holding the dress in her hands, she suddenly laughed. It had been so long since she'd felt this way, excited for an evening, for a date, for simply being herself in a peaceful moment. When she got home, Tusan carefully hung the outfit on a hanger. She stood looking at it for a while, her heart unusually warm. No grand promises were needed. Just one evening beside the person she loved, after long, busy days, that was enough. Tusan took a deep breath and waited. Tonight, she would go on a date with Hai. Right on time, the familiar sound of a car stopped in front of the gate. As Tusan stepped out, she saw Hai standing there, simple shirt, a slightly tired face, but a very genuine smile. No flowers, no elaborate greetings, just a gaze held long enough for both of them to feel at ease. "I'm here." Machem, Tusan nodded, smiling softly. They ate at a small restaurant tucked away in a quiet alley. It wasn't fancy, the wooden tables and chairs were old, the yellow lights gentle, and the food smelled comfortingly familiar. Tusan realized she had been here long ago, at a time when her life was far more unstable. Back then, she never imagined she would one day sit here feeling this light. While waiting for the food, Hai was silent for a moment, then spoke. "I've been so busy lately. There were times I knew you were waiting, and I couldn't be there." Tusan looked at him without avoiding his eyes. She felt no anger, no hurt, only tenderness. "I understand," she said softly. "As long as you still think of me, that's enough." Hai exhaled, as if something heavy had finally lifted from his chest. He nodded without saying more, but his gaze softened greatly. The meal passed slowly. They talked about the smallest things, a workday, a good dish, a passing story. There was no need to force cheerfulness, no need to fill every silence. Sometimes they ate quietly together, and the silence was comfortable, never lonely. After leaving the restaurant, Hai suggested taking a walk. The evening street was quiet, the breeze cool, streetlights casting long bands of light. They walked side by side, unhurried. Neither reached for the other's hand first. But as the distance between them naturally closed, their fingers brushed, once, then again. Finally, Hai gently took Tusan's hand, as if afraid of startling her. Tusan didn't pull away. She looked up at the dark sky, her heart strangely calm. No more pressing questions, no more fear of being left behind. Only the present moment, a simple evening, a man beside her, and the feeling of being exactly where she belonged. They kept walking, hand in hand, saying nothing more. After all the pain they had endured, this peace, however simple, became the most precious thing of all. The next morning, Tusan woke earlier than usual. Sunlight slipped through the window, laying a thin stripe across the floor. She brewed herself a cup of tea, still wrapped in the gentle feeling from the night before. Everything inside her seemed to slow down, to grow lighter, as if she had crossed a long stretch of road and was finally allowed to rest. The doorbell rang unexpectedly. Tusan was slightly surprised, visitors were rare at this hour. She set the teacup down and opened the door to find a delivery boy standing at the gate. He handed her a cream-colored envelope with simple decorative edging. An invitation. Tusan took it, thanked him softly, and closed the door. She stood still for a moment, her eyes lingering on the neat handwriting on the envelope. A faint intuition stirred within her. When she opened it, a wedding invitation appeared, white background, elegant lettering. Trang's and Tone's names were printed side by side, neat and clear, like a quiet declaration. Tusan froze for a few seconds. Then she smiled. Not a smile of surprise, nor one that broke into tears, just a deep, peaceful smile. She sat down, placed the invitation on the table, and reread each line, the date, the time, the location. Short phrases, yet carrying an entire long journey behind them. She thought of Trang, the woman who had once been timid, who had stood before the door of her lover's family fearing rejection. She thought of Tone, the man who had once hesitated, torn between filial duty and love. And now, those two names lay side by side on the card, with no distance between them. She felt happy. Happy as if a part of her own old pain had been comforted. There are kinds of happiness we don't hold ourselves, yet simply seeing others attain them is enough to warm the heart. Tusan picked up her phone and sent Trang a very short message. "I'm happy for you." Just minutes later, Trang called back, her voice choked with emotion. "Because of you. I have this day." Tusan shook her head gently, smiling. "No. It's because you were strong enough." After hanging up, Tusan leaned back in her chair. Outside, the sun climbed higher. She realized that there are paths that seem to have no way out, but with enough patience and sincerity, a door will eventually open. She picked up the wedding invitation again, lightly smoothing its edge. In a very quiet corner of her heart, Tusan knew. Happiness doesn't arrive at the same time for everyone, but when it does come, it comes at exactly the right moment. That evening, when Hai stopped by, Tusan handed him the wedding invitation, still carrying the fresh scent of new paper. Hai took it, reading slowly, as if he didn't want to miss a single line. He looked up, a clear smile forming at the corner of his lips. At last, they've made it to each other. Tusan nodded. In her eyes was a joy that was sincere, without a trace of comparison. Hai set the invitation down on the table, looked at her for a moment, then said softly, like a passing breeze. Then let's prepare a gift for them. That simple sentence warmed Tusan's heart. She nodded, feeling as though the two of them were stepping together into something very ordinary, yet deeply meaningful. They began with the smallest details. Hai suggested buying a joint gift, nothing flashy, just something that suited Trang. Tusan thought for a moment, then said. Trang likes simple things. Maybe, flowers, and something that symbolizes a beginning. So the next day, they went together to choose the gift. Tusan stood for a long time at the flower stall, weighing each color carefully. She chose flowers that were elegant rather than bright, lasting and fragrant, much like the way Trang had endured her difficult years. Hai stood beside her, patiently waiting, occasionally offering a quiet suggestion, as if afraid to disturb her thoughts. Then came the envelope and the message. Tusan held the pen, pausing for a long while. She didn't write elaborate wishes, just a few short lines, straight from her heart, wishing Trang peace, and the chance to be beside the one she loved without fear. Hai watched her write without saying a word. Only when she set the pen down did he gently take her hand. You're so thoughtful. Tusan smiled. Because I understand that feeling. That evening, they neatly arranged the gift and placed it in a simple paper bag. The small room suddenly felt unusually warm, not because of the light, but because of the feeling of preparing joy for someone else together, with sincerity. When everything was finished, Tusan sat down and let out a light breath. Hai sat beside her, shoulder touching shoulder. They didn't talk about the future, nor mention any grand promises. Yet in that moment, Tusan realized that happiness sometimes begins with very small things, like choosing a bouquet together, writing a few heartfelt words, and knowing that you're no longer alone. She turned to look at Hai and gently squeezed his hand. Trang's wedding was approaching. And somewhere deep in Tusan's heart, something very tender was quietly beginning to take root. Trang and Tone's wedding took place on a sun-filled morning. The sky was clear, the breeze light, as if it, too, wished to preserve the moment in its entirety. The ceremony space was decorated simply yet elegantly, white flowers woven with fresh green branches, warm golden lights lining the aisle, everything just enough to highlight the two people standing at the center. Trang appeared in a graceful wedding gown. She walked slowly, her hand trembling slightly, but her eyes were bright and steady. The years of fear and hesitation seemed to have been left behind. When she saw Tone waiting at the end of the aisle, Trang smiled softly, the smile of someone who had weathered enough storms to know she was exactly where she belonged. Tone looked different today. He stood straight, his face calm, but his eyes glimmered with emotion. As Trang came closer, he reached out and took her hand, a firm, certain grip, like an unspoken promise. From now on, they would walk forward together, and no one would have to stand alone again. The exchange of rings unfolded in a sacred silence. When the ring gently slid onto Trang's finger, she couldn't hold back her tears. Tone leaned down and whispered something only the two of them could hear. Trang nodded, tears falling, but they were tears of happiness. In the seats below, Tusan quietly watched the ceremony. She didn't cry, she simply felt an unexpected warmth in her chest. She understood how strong Trang had to be to reach this moment. Hai stood beside her, gently placing a hand on her shoulder. He said nothing, yet his presence alone was enough to put her at ease. When the official declaration rang out, the entire space seemed to brighten. Applause, laughter, and radiant smiles from family and friends blended together. Tone's mother stepped forward and gave Trang a gentle hug, not loud or dramatic, but full of acknowledgement. That single embrace was enough to erase old distances. The reception was warm and intimate. Trang and Tone raised their glasses together, their smiles never leaving their lips. They looked at each other more than they looked at their guests, as if simply confirming that the other was here, right now, was enough. As sunset fell, the last light of day bathed the garden in gold. Trang leaned her head on Tone's shoulder. No more worries, no more fear. Just the two of them and a new journey opening before their eyes. The wedding ended in laughter and blessings. But for Trang and Tone, it wasn't an ending, it was the beginning of a life where love had been called by its true name, and finally found its rightful place. Tusan stood slightly back, blending into the rows of guest chairs. She didn't want to be the focus of any gaze, choosing instead to observe quietly from afar, where Trang and Tone stood beneath the lights, amid unending applause. She looked at Trang in her pure white gown, her face so radiant it made all the unsteady days of the past fade away. Every smile, every step Trang took carried a different kind of steadiness, the steadiness of someone who had finally been loved and chosen completely. Tusan felt her heart soften, but not with sadness. With admiration. She sincerely wished Trang and Tone happiness, not just for a beautiful wedding day, but for many peaceful mornings to come, for simple meals, for moments of exhaustion where they would still choose to hold hands instead of letting go. Ordinary things, but the very things that keep a marriage lasting. As gentle music filled the air, Tusan found herself thinking of her own life. She had once stood where Trang stood, she had loved, hoped, and feared rejection. She had once believed that perhaps weddings, white dresses, and vows before a crowd weren't meant for her. That her happiness only needed to be calm and stable, without a complete ceremony. But now, watching Trang stand beside Tone, Tusan suddenly recognized a very honest truth within herself. She wished for it too. Not a grand wedding, nor lavish congratulations. She simply wished that one day, she could stand beside a man who loved her deeply enough, patiently enough, bravely enough to take her hand before everyone, just as Tone was doing for Trang. Tusan smiled softly. A small, private smile, meant only for herself. Hai was beside her before she even realized it. He didn't ask or say anything. He simply placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, a quiet gesture, but enough for Tusan to know that if such a day ever came, she wouldn't walk up the aisle alone. The lights of the wedding still glowed brightly. Laughter continued to ring out. And in Tusan's heart, a very gentle wish had just been named, unhurried, unspoken, yet sincere enough to make her believe that one day, it would find its way to her too. At the moment when Trang turned her back and the bridal bouquet was tossed into the air amid cheerful cheers, Tusan remained standing quietly at the edge of the crowd. She smiled by reflex, a gentle, almost imperceptible smile. In her mind, that ritual was meant for younger, more carefree girls, those ready to shout, run forward, and reach high with undisguised excitement. She didn't step forward. Tusan simply stood there, her hands clasped in front of her chest, her eyes following the bouquet as it rose and fell like a fleeting moment of joy. She expected nothing. She even lowered her head slightly, as if afraid that someone's gaze might accidentally touch the very private wishes hidden in her heart. Then, amid the laughter and raised arms, Hai stepped forward. He didn't push or rush, he just stood in the right place, at the right time. The bouquet landed neatly in his hands, so lightly it felt as though it had been destined from the start. The entire space gasped. Tusan startled and looked up. In the instant their eyes met, she felt her heart stutter. Hai turned toward her, the bouquet still warm in his hands, his face a little awkward but his gaze unmistakably clear. He walked toward her through the teasing remarks and playful whistles. Tusan felt her ears grow warm. Instinctively, she wanted to step back, but her feet refused to move. When Hai stood before her, he didn't speak loudly. He simply held the bouquet out to her, his voice lowered, meant only for her to hear. "I think, this bouquet should belong to you." Tusan froze. She reached out very slowly, as if afraid that touching it would make the moment disappear. When her fingers gently wrapped around the bouquet, her heart began to beat faster. A distinct sense of shyness rose within her, not the flustered awkwardness of a young girl, but the tender uncertainty of someone who had endured many wounds and wasn't used to being placed at the center of such a beautiful hope. She lowered her head, avoiding the surrounding gazes. The corner of her lips curved into a small, private smile. Her cheeks burned warmly. For a brief moment, Tusan wished the crowd would disperse quickly, so she wouldn't have to face the feeling of being both chosen and seen, a sensation that was sweet and yet made her heart tremble. Hai looked at her, his eyes softening. He didn't touch her then, he simply stood close enough for Tusan to know she wasn't alone amid all those watching eyes. The party gradually drew to a close. The music softened, the warm yellow lights dimmed. As guests slowly departed, Tusan still held the bouquet in her hands, glancing down at it from time to time, as if needing to confirm that it was all real. They were the last to leave the wedding. Outside along the walkway, the night breeze blew gently. Hai reached for Tusan's hand. The grip wasn't hurried or tight, but it was firm enough that she didn't pull away. Her hand was still slightly cold, but her heart was slowly warming. After a long while, Tusan finally spoke, her voice soft and a little shy. "Just now. I really didn't know what to do." Hai let out a quiet laugh. "Me neither." She turned to look at him, her eyes faintly embarrassed. "I thought you were just catching it for fun." Hai shook his head, tightening his grip on her hand just a little, as if to reassure her. "No. At that moment, I only thought, if it was a wedding bouquet, I wanted to give it to the right person." Tusan fell silent. The breeze carried a light floral scent. She lowered her head and spoke very slowly. "I don't dare think too much. But when I held that bouquet, my heart really trembled." Hai stopped. He turned to face her beneath the yellow streetlight at the end of the road. "Trembling is okay," he said. "As long as you don't have to be afraid." Tusan looked up at him. The shyness from before was gone, replaced by a very soft feeling, as if, after years of telling herself she didn't need much, she was finally allowing herself to wish for something beautiful. They walked on again, hand in hand, slowly through the quiet night. Behind them was a complete wedding. And ahead, for Tusan, was a hope just large enough for her heart to dare to beat once more.
Xin chào mọi người. Vậy là sau những khó khăn và biến cố thì cuối cùng mẹ của Toàn cũng chấp nhận Trang và hai người có một đám cưới lãng mạn hạnh phúc bên nhau, và những người yêu nhau thì sẽ đến được với nhau. Liệu rằng Tiểu San và Hải sẽ như nào, và sắp tới Hải sẽ cầu hôn hay là chuẩn bị cho Tiểu San một đám cưới hay không, thì mời mọi người cùng đón xem những video tiếp theo nha. Cảm ơn mọi người đã xem hết video hôm nay và ủng hộ kênh của mình. Nếu mà mọi người yêu thích những câu chuyện mình chia sẻ thì nhớ like, share, bật chuông thông báo để nhận thông báo khi mình đăng video mới nhất, và cũng như ủng hộ kênh của mình, chia sẻ đến bạn bè để mọi người cùng biết đến, và nhớ để lại cho mình một số nhận xét ở dưới phần bình luận để mình có động lực làm nhiều video hơn cho mọi người cùng xem. Cảm ơn mọi người và hẹn gặp lại mọi người ở video tiếp theo nhé.